People, episode 8, record 24
one of the main reasons,
1081,
one of
30
the
minutes.
few stores are struggling with depression. Yeah. Hello and welcome again to the Valley's People. Today from Toronto we're going to meet a man who's been associated with the cooperative movement in the Hunter Valley for 34 years of his life. And also someone who has a surname that's been associated with the scrap metal industry in the Hunter Valley unlike any other for a generation or more. I hope you can join us today for the Valley's People. Thanks for joining us today. My first guest is a man who's played quite a part in civic affairs in the Hunter Valley for many years. And some of the things that he may well be remembered for is his time with the cooperative movement in the Hunter Valley. Les Gibbs, General Manager of the Newcastle Cooperative Store for some, 24 years?
24 years.
And 10 years as Secretary.
That's right.
So it should be that you know a lot about the cooperative movement. What is the cooperative movement? Should we define it?
Well, Ron, I think the simplest definition I could give, and the one I usually give, is to say that it's a voluntary organisation of people who feel that by following a cooperative activity, they will best serve their own needs.
Right.
And sometimes these people are producers of goods in the community, sometimes they're consumers of goods.
Yeah. Now, well, how did all that begin as a philosophy, Les?
Well, it goes back a long way, Ron, a lot of generations to go back, because experiments in the establishment of cooperative societies began in the 1750s to 1800, not successfully. But if I was asked to put a precise date on when I feel the cooperative evolved and developed,
yes,
I'd say it was in 1844 at a town called Rochdale in England, where 28 weavers began meeting to discuss the plight that they were in as individuals, because this is in the period of the hungry 40s.
Yeah.
Wages were low, it was hard to keep body and soul together. And they met many times, these people, and decided finally that after considering all the things that they might do to help themselves, the best thing to do was to open a store, and they would control it. And they were very optimistic, because they set down a group of principles, which I can tell you about if you wish to know. And they also decided that when they had a surplus, they would set aside, first of all, interest on capital of the people that had invested money.
Yes.
They would set aside an amount to cover education so that other people could get the message.
Right.
And they would set aside an amount to cover reserves. Now, when they opened, there were 28 of them. And they took up premises in a place called Toad Lane, not a very impressive address. But the Rochdale Pioneers Cooperative Society today has recreated in Toad Lane the store which these people opened in that year 1844.
Really?
I had the privilege of going into that store whilst I was in England, and I was amazed. It was a dirt floor, it was off the beaten track to some extent. The only goods that were there appeared to be some sugar and a lot of candles and soap and a few commodities of that nature. A set of scales, and it was dilapidated and dingy and most uninviting, but that's where it started.
Yeah, quite a hallowed moment, really, I suppose, when you thought of the efforts of those pioneers. Was that the spirit that the founders brought to the Hunter Valley when they came?
Well, it was the spirit, because they were English people who were coming here, and the first thing they said is, where's the co-op store? And there wasn't one. But there had been experiments in Newcastle and the various suburbs. For instance, there was a store at Lambton, in Merriweather, I think one at Stockton. Mm-hmm. And these were suburban activities in the name of cooperatives in those days, but eventually they came together in the Newcastle Industry Co-op.
Well, what were these small group of people aiming at, Les, when they started? Did they just meet as a few friends, or what?
Well, if I could talk first, Ron, about the principles which the 28 weavers had written down
Yeah, right.
as guidelines.
Yeah.
This is the principles to which they were attached, the people who came. And amongst the principles was the fact that there had to be democratic control. So it didn't matter what you spent with the store, it didn't matter what you invested with the store. You got one man, one vote.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a fundamental difference between what a cooperative society does and private enterprise.
Yes, we have proxies and all sorts of things.
That's right. And they carried resolutions about fixed rate of interest on capital, and they found the secret of it by being the first people to think of rebate on purchases, commonly referred to as the divi.
Yeah.
Now these things were accepted by English people who came to Australia. And they came into the Newcastle district and said, where's the co-op store?
Yes.
And there wasn't one to show them. But in 1898, meetings were being held locally in the home of William Channon, who lived in Tudor Street Extended, and people who were interested in the formation of a co-op were invited to his home to meetings. And at the second meeting held in his home in 1898, it was decided to follow the example of the weavers in Rochdale. They had 28, we had 33. And with 33 members, a decision was made to establish a co-op. And what happened was that, according to the minutes, it was so successful, this meeting, where they made their decision to proceed, that they decided the minute in the books that they all, when the meeting broke up, they all went to the nearest hotel to drink the health of the society which they decided to begin.
Oh, well, good on them. That's an incredible scenario, because to advance it, you know, to your time when you were general manager, say in the big department store of the 60s, so just wondering whether those people's expectations were the same.
Talk about their expectations, they would never have believed what would have happened in size-wise. But on the 11th of August 1898, in a little 15 shillings a week rented shop in Florence Street, Wickham, they began what became the Newcastle District Cooperative Society.
That's incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible.
Yeah. Well, how did you perceive the shoppers of the 60s, Les? What were you setting out to do in the spirit of those founders?
Well, obviously in the initial stages, both at Rochdale and in Newcastle, it was the bare necessities. They didn't have capital to invest in capital expenditure of any nature at all. It was a hand-to-mouth operation until they overcame their initial difficulties. They started with a manager and a boy, and the boy minded the shop while the manager went out, and then he stayed in while the boy delivered the goods. And this was the way in which they built it up. So it was the bare necessities of life that they started to provide for.
Yes, but then, you know, in the zenith of the cooperative movement in the Hunter Valley, we had bread and milk and garages and a full department store, really.
Well, that's right, and it's to regret that we still haven't got them. But the facts are that, of course, that there are great changes take place in community life. There are people who you can't convince, but I refer perhaps mainly to young people, that there's going to be a tomorrow. They're not really interested in the rebate to the extent that their parents were, because they don't want to wait.
Yeah.
They want it in their hot little hand. I can understand that. But there's been a great change in the age group. Cooperatives get left sometimes with people of middle age and older people, and the young people who are free and aren't sure that there's going to be a tomorrow, they go and shop and make their purchase for cash on the spot, no waiting 6 months for a rebate, and they think that's the way they want to trade.
One of the interesting things that I found out about you, you were responsible as a person for bringing over the plastic little credit card.
That's right, the introduction of tokens. It was quite interesting because we were the first in Australia to introduce them. But David Jones were very close on our heels. Not knowing that we had them, they prepared an advertisement to go in the Sydney Herald to tell people that this was the first time they'd been used in Australia. When it was corrected, they were kind enough to change their ad and put it into the Sydney metropolitan area, which pleased us.
Yeah, so the cooperative store was first with that
That's
one.
right.
Yeah. How did you respond in those days to those critics that were saying that we know all about the divi? You put 10% on the top, so you can take 10% off.
Ron. You know, the one that goes with that is the story of the woman at West Wallsend who went to the store and said, "Can I have an empty box? I don't want it for nothing, because if I don't pay for it, I get no divi."
Was there any validity in the critics at the time? Because mainly other businesses in town, weren't they? They were spreading that
Oh,
sort
well,
of
our
stuff.
opposition would use any methods that they could within reason to criticise.
The cooperative movement was one of those movements which really struggled out of the Depression and through the Depression, wasn't it, in Hunter Valley?
Yes, it rocked, but it survived. And that was... and when you had people who were as dedicated at the beginnings of the co-op as they were in this city in its initial stages. You know, I think of people like the late George Booth, Kenny Booth's father. He was chairman of the board, a dedicated cooperator if ever there was one. Went all over the state. Anybody who had a cooperative problem turned to George Booth. He was the man who got cooperatives represented in the cabinet of New South Wales by his persistent efforts to say that we should have a minister to whom we can go in our troubles and who can supervise the growth of cooperatives. Teddy Brent, Ken Matheson, Dick Blakey, all people in Newcastle who rallied to the cooperative idea and supported it to the hilt. They talked about it, they practiced it, and it was good to see the way in which other groups in the community. It's said that if you came to Newcastle, you wanted a job mining, the manager of one mine used to say, "Have you joined the co-op?" Now, if you haven't, you better, because there's no job here till you do.
Really?
That's right. And the railway people came in as a group in support of the cooperative idea. So there were a lot of people who gave us tremendous support.
Yeah. How would you rate now the actual cooperative movement through the Hunter Valley? Was this the main outlet in Australia?
Retail-wise or
Yes,
in
as a
any
spirit,
field?
yes.
Well, retail-wise, we'd be the biggest cooperative in the Southern Hemisphere.
Really?
Yes. We had a setup structured on the lines of a head office with a department store, supported by suburban branches. We had bakeries and service stations, as you have mentioned, and we had strong support in the community. The store was part of the community. People say to me when they see me on the street, "Gee, I miss it."
Yes. Yeah. And of course, even today, numismatic experts around the world are trying to get bread tokens and milk tokens of the Curry Co-op and other places. They now fetch value, little things that used to leave out for the man to come around.
That's right. Well, it's a different way of life.
Yes.
People bought things when they had the cash to buy them. But, you know, these days, everybody's got credit cards of all sorts and descriptions. Yeah. And the needs of people have changed, Ron.
Yes.
People want boats and washing machines.
Yeah, and they can't wait for the divi.
They can't wait for the divi, some of them. They've got to involve themselves.
How do you find time now with Newcastle West Rotary and the College of Advanced Education and the Newcastle University Council and a member of the Water Board? When are you going to run down?
I'm running down fast. I've gradually unloaded. I'm no longer in Newcastle West Rotary Club, and I think one or two other things that you mentioned I've become very slow with.
Yes, but they're part of your recent record, Les.
Oh, yes, and I've enjoyed it. You know, it's been very nice to sit on the board of the Building Society and know that people are getting loans to provide their home. And I think that all the movements that are being made to try and make it easier for people to get their home. I think in this district we could say there's more people live in a home that they own or one they're paying off than anywhere else in Australia.
Yes, well, we can see now why you got the Order of Australia and other awards. Les Gibbs, we honour you for your work with the cooperative movement in the Hunter Valley, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'll be back in just a moment with our next guest in the Valley's People. Thanks for having us back. The Balkom family is a name which is well known in scrap metal in the Hunter Valley. Almost like a steptoe and son situation, because Dad Balkom began the family business and the brothers carried it on. Here's one of the brothers with us today. Allan Balkom, welcome to the Valley's People. It's a name that's synonymous with scrap metal, and I'm just wondering how it all began.
Well, it's a long story, Ron, you know.
Well, we've got the time, because scrap metal fascinates me, Allan.
Yeah, well, Dad started about 1949. We reached over the chap next door, worked for Newcastle Scrap those days, and they used to talk over the fence and say, you know, we're making a quid. And so Dad started out himself. He won a contract from the railway workshops, Cardiff, to start with, and continued on from there, you know.
But your dad was a painter and docker, so where did he get this interest in scrap metal?
Probably the fellow next door.
What was he collecting?
We used to buy the steel turnings, lathe turnings from the Cardiff workshops, railway workshops. And a weekend it was gather the kids up and go knocking on doors around Maitland, Cessnock area, buying batteries and radiators. And
Well, how did this affect your early life, as you can remember? You know, as a schoolboy,
Well,
were you
yeah.
born into a scrap metal family?
Yeah, well, as long as I can remember, Ron, you know. It was great weekends, you know. You'd go out and buy batteries until the novelty wore off, you know.
I just think of trying to find this transition between painter and docker and scrap metal, and then how it got through
None
to
at
the
all, I
brother.
don't think, really, Ron.
No relationship.
No.
He's just fascinated by what, storing things or collecting
Oh, he's the
things?
sort of fella that seen something he bought, if he thought there was a quid in it, he'd buy it, you know.
Yeah, well, there were three other brothers, weren't there? There's
John
Graham,
was the elder brother, and Graham and Wayne.
and all of you, as boys, were sort of brought into this industry.
Yeah. John left school at 14, I left school at 14, and Graham went on till he was 15, and he'd done the leaving, and Wayne went on to 14. We all formed a company when Wayne left school at 14. Dad stepped out of it and gave it to the boys.
Was it your dad who was supposed to have said that, or was it someone else, that scrap metal was the greatest business in the world?
Yeah, he always said this, yeah.
Really? How did you convince others of that?
I don't, we did.
In those days, though, Alan, I guess that people weren't as conscious of scrap metal as they are now. So how did you really get them involved in saving metal for you?
Plumbers, electricians, engineering firms, you know, they've always got a collection of scrap metal, and it was always something that was in their way, really, Ron, you know. Garages, battery builders and things like this, you know. Industries always had a problem with their scrap too, you know. We introduced those Morrell bins into Newcastle, and it just went boom, you know.
They're the big metal bins that just come along and pick them up.
Yeah.
Of course, when you start talking about early days or the embryo of scrap metal businesses, and particularly family businesses, because we all have that vision of Steptoe and Son with your backyard piled up with all sorts of things.
It wasn't quite as bad as
not,
that.
Not as bad as that, no. No, of course, it developed into a major industry in the Hunter Valley, and of course continues on today. Particularly, I understand, in the in the world of collieries and dismantling of collieries. So can you fill me in on that?
We got we're lucky enough to really we got a contract with Coal and Allied and RW Miller, you know. And those days, Coal and Allied had a hell of a lot of old pits, you know, the old miners, you know, little one-ton skips, and because they closed down as you know, we moved in and cleaned them up and burnt the old skips and pulled the machinery out, you know. I think today, you know, that sort of machinery today, if they were to close a pit down today in Liddell, for instance, you know, everyone could use the machinery that they use, you know. But those days, the mines were just so much bigger than everyone else, you know, that their machinery and so forth was no use to anyone, you know. It was just scrap regardless of how new it was, you know.
But I guess well maintained, so it must have worried you sometimes of pulling all this apart.
Oh, it's, you know, you look at some things and it was, you'd say, oh, that's new, you know. But it was scrap. They said it was scrap. And
how did you price such a thing where you've got such colossal machinery and nobody wants it?
Well, I don't think it was our decision, Ron, you know. The coal company said, you know, they made the decision, you know. Will we store it, will we use it again, or we go bang and scrap it now, you know? And everything had to be scrapped. Like if they said scrap, you know, that was it. It had to be broken up.
And the Balkoms, so I guess that means you in some stages, went all over New South Wales collecting scrap metal.
Yeah, we went as, you know, coast and inland, you know, buying scrap.
Any particular kind of things that you were after?
No, only non-ferrous those days, Ron, you know, because there was, you know, there wasn't the money in steel, scrap steel those days, you know. It was all non-ferrous, radiators, copper, brass, aluminium, you know. And we had a set run, you know. You'd buy off plumbers, electricians, and, you know, there's always a scrap dealer in every town, and the councils, you know, the shires, you know, always had scrap wire, you know, from their overhead lines, you know.
Yes. I guess the mine runs away with it a little bit, and you all, I have visions of you maybe finding valuable things in all the scrap metal, particularly people throwing out brass bed knobs and things of the day.
Yeah, we don't. You know, we never do, you know, so we're on, but, you know, surprisingly, the amount of people that would come through and you'd say, oh, you know, you know, they say, is there anything interesting we can look through? And we say, oh, go your hardest, you know. And they come back with arms full of stuff, and they go, oh, you know, yeah, give us a couple of bucks and keep me out the road, you know. But to us, nothing was valuable, you know. It was scrap, and that was it, you know.
You mean to say you saw everything at a certain price per tonne?
Well, if you saved everything that you thought was valuable in the scrap, you know, you'd want a 100-acre paddock, you know.
It may have been the way to go, though, with hindsight. What sort of things would come through that you would have perceived as you know, scrap to you, but someone else's value?
A particular fellow in Newcastle, as a matter of fact, I think I could say his name, Bob Baldwin, was mad on Buddhas, you know, and he always said, if you ever see a brass Buddha, it reminds me of me, I want it, you know, and we used to stack these Buddhas up for Bob, you know.
Spiritually or science?
Well, I don't know what he'd done with them, but if he put them in the house, he must have a room full of them, you know.
Yeah, so they had no value to you with them?
No, they were just scrap brass to us, you know. And,
it was your brother John that owned Luskin Star, the racehorse?
Yeah, yeah, that's, John was the eldest brother, yeah.
Yeah, so what do you regard yourself as, a racehorse family or a scrap metal family or a transport family now, isn't it? Balkom and Maddox Transport?
It was funny, there was three of us used to race motorbikes, TQs, you know. Then we got away from that, and Graham got into the racehorses, and John, Wayne, I think, had a horse at one time, you know. I never bothered with horses. I stuck with the motorbikes. And
well, it's this motorbikes. It's come down presumably to son Craig of yours now, because he's state champion and Australian champion. Isn't he?
I sponsored a fella called Greg Premer. It was pretty well known. He got smashed up about 18 months ago. He's brain damaged now and physically disabled, you know. And I put him on a bike, and we put Craig on a bike, and I finished up with 13 titles in 3 years between the two of them, you know. But Craig hasn't done much in the last 12 months since Greg got smashed up. His first time on a bike, really, for nearly 9 months. He went to Dubbo, so some 6 months ago now. It was his first ride for a while since Greg got smashed up, and he won the New South Wales 250 title and broke a track record over there. And next race went out and broke his arm, and he hasn't done anything since. But he'll be ready for next year.
Does this worry you a little bit, your son having spills on motorbikes?
Yes, it does, really, Ron. It's, I never ever thought this would happen to Greg, you know. In my opinion, a lot of people said, you know, one of the greatest fellas ever threw a leg out of a motorbike was Greg Premer. And you'd never thought this could ever happen to him, you know. And it worries me now that it may happen to Craig, you know. But
well, deeply enough to prevent him, or do you prefer him to...
it's entirely up to him, you know. I said to him when Greg got smashed up, if you want to ride, I'm with you all the way. It's entirely up to yourself. I won't take you off the bikes, you know. He gave it away for, like I say, for nearly 12 months. He came back, took another title, and he's still pretty keen. So until he says, you know, he doesn't want to ride, well, I'm with him all the way.
Well, Allan Balkom and Maddox Transport still seem to live fairly dangerously, I hear.
We still pack around, yeah.
Yeah, carting explosives around the Hunter Valley?
Yeah, we cart well, it's not actually an explosive at the stage we cart it, Ron. It's nitropryl. It's in a fertiliser stage that we cart it. We cart it for R&H Transport at Tomigo, you know, and have done for some 15 or 16 years now.
Well, I can drive a little more closely to your trucks. They scared me before.
Yeah, until I mix it, don't worry about it.
Okay. Allan Balkom, thanks very much, because scrap metal is fascinating, and a little more than fascinating, really, I guess, because it's true to say that the Balkom family just about collected all the scrap out of the Hunter Valley for a generation or more.
There's not much left, Ron.
Not much left. Well, anyway, free enterprise may win out and someone else may start. Allan Balkom, thanks very much for joining us today on The Valley's People. I'll be back in just a moment. Thanks for joining us today. Two guests. Firstly, the man who was general manager of the cooperative store and also served them for 24 years in that capacity and 10 years as company secretary. 34 years in all of the cooperative movement. And then Allan Balkom, who comes from the Balkom family, scrap metal name, that'll be known throughout the Hunter Valley for many generations to come. I hope you enjoyed our guests, and I hope too that you'll join us again for our next program of The Valley's People. Goodbye for now.